Hi, so welcome everybody to this recording for the Collegeville 2020 workshop. I'm Dan Katz from the University of Illinois, and I'm going to be talking with Rinku Gupta from Argonne National Laboratory. Rinku, can you say a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself?
Sure, Dan. Thank you. Thank you for interviewing me. So I am Rinku Gupta. I am a research software specialist at Argonne National Lab, and I have been at Argonne National Lab for about a dozen years, and I've worked on a bunch of projects, and a lot of my recent work focuses on developer productivity, software sustainability. I'm a part of the ideas team, and we do a lot of work with regards to these topics currently.
So since this is a workshop that's about productivity, what does productivity mean to you? Can you talk a little bit about how you would define developer productivity?
Sure. I think developer productivity in any kind of scientific environment basically means doing high quality development work in minimum time with minimum resources. In a software scientific environment at an individual level, it means, I think for me, it means factoring all the risks, but still developing high quality software. By high quality software, I mean which works as intended, which meets your goals in terms of functionality, sustainability, user friendliness. So developing high quality software within the schedule, within the resources provided. If you expand beyond the individual level, go to the team level, then the definition expands to team level to ensure that the entire team works together to develop this great quality software. That's the critical thing, working together. But in that sense, scientific productivity, developer productivity in scientific environments is not very different from productivity in any other typical industry. You are basically trying to do work in a better, faster, cheaper way.
Would you do you think the work itself is different of developing scientific software versus developing software in a different environment?
Is the work different? Is scientific development work different as compared to work in an industry?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I think it depends on what you're doing in the industry, because industry also has, research teams that work on research. Of course, in the scientific field, a lot of us who do development, we are not just doing development conforming to a set of requirements, right? It's a lot of open-ended development, where we are thinking of ideas, developing them on the fly, thinking of better ideas. So there is that big difference between traditional industry development, where you're given a set of customer requirements which are very end result oriented, and it's, in that sense, it's kind of easier to follow what the end goal is. Whereas as compared to scientific environment, where the goal is more open-ended, and the directions you have to take are not clearly specified right in the start. So obviously the environment is totally different, but eventually productivity is basically as a part of a team, how are you working together to develop really good quality software within the set of with the set of resources you have, or the set of constraints you have, which is there in every project.
So what do you think are the interesting challenges these days, particularly with research software or scientific software? Sorry, in terms of productivity.
In terms of productivity, I think talking about scientific environment in particular, the biggest challenge that has been, continues to be, is the lack of good software practices. And when I say good software practices, I mean, not having a design in place before implementation, not having testing processes in place, or not having enough documentation in place before a release. Of course, the nature of how teams are funded and how teams are conditioned to operate with tight funding and the deadlines that they have to encounter are reasons that contribute to the lack of these software practices. Teams usually follow a very specific task tied to a very specific funding model, and in that's the kind of approach. And these small tasks, become much larger projects as time goes by, but sometimes they lack the right foundation when it comes to software practices, and that may make things challenging in the future. So definitely not having good software practices. I'm not saying all, like not, there are big projects that have that follow great software practices, but most small projects that start with seed funding, they may be lacking in good software practices. So that's definitely a big lacking. And now when it comes to, like team members in a team, in the scientific environment, as we all know, we are working on a bunch of things together, right? So we do a lot of context switching, and context switching between too many items slows down productivity quite a bit. Like we are working on code development, we are working on writing proposals, writing papers, doing outreach through conferences, workshops. And this kind of context switches, which is the nature of our life, does slow one down and may become a problem in productivity, as I've seen in some cases. And in a lot of scientific teams, I think team productivity is also reduced when you have a lot of flux, like when you have a lot of new members coming in, old members going out, the time taken for onboarding, offboarding. This happens, a lot in newer teams that may be composed of postdocs and interns. So that hampers team productivity quite a bit. And then there is this ambiguity of life, such as all these pandemics that we are facing, right? And teams have to now adapt to newer working style, and as you know, that is highly challenging to productivity. So there are quite a few things we can work on, because the challenges are there for scientific teams.
I guess I'm curious. You were mentioning that that smaller teams often have maybe less defined practices, and larger teams often have defined practices, and they're successful with those practices.
Well,
Is that?
Well, you can't generalize that. So I think you should take it with a grain of salt, because I think it depends on the maturity of the team that is involved in the project. But it can be, in my experience, when a project starts out with seed fundings, the priorities are so different. The priorities are more to show that the goals can be achieved, and that there is a larger plan in place with the goals. And therefore, there are resources lacking to devote to good software practices. The willingness may be there, but sometimes the resources in terms of time and people are not there. And that's why I say that for smaller projects starting with smaller funding, uh, you have to be very careful when it comes to software practices, because eventually, if the product has to become bigger, a strong foundation will still be needed, or an incrementally incorporated foundation for good software practices has to be put in place.
Okay. So I guess given that, what what do you think are interesting or potentially useful technical approaches to improve developer productivity?
Yeah. Well, I guess context switching, pandemics, they are now become a part and parcel of our life, right? So we have to live with that. But technically speaking, uh, good software practices, which is one of the biggest challenges I mentioned, is one of the are the key elements to improving productivity in a big way. Like having basic things like good version control, having verification, validation processes in place, having a well-defined testing like functionality, integration testing in place, having code reviews, following agile methods, documentation. So all these are basically good software practices, software development practices, and that will go a long way in improving productivity. Good training for team members, that's also essential. Like in research environments, most people learn on the job. They do have the foundation, but they'll have to learn new skills on the job. And getting the right material to learn from, that is critical for them to start being productive early on. And if you're in the CSC community and you don't know where to get started, then there are resources available. Like, for example, you have the Better Scientific Software, bssw.io portal now. And that is one very good resource to understand what is productivity, how to achieve it. It has tons of information on software sustainability, software quality. And if you are already savvy about these topics, and it's a good central hub for you to share your knowledge, so that people who are trying to learn about this knowledge, they can learn from you, right? And so we can all learn and share together, and we can make the CSC community like much stronger when it comes to these topics. That's what I think.
Yeah, so I think you've kind of touched on this already, but are there any other cultural approaches that you think we should be thinking about again to improve developer productivity?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I look at my teams at Argonne, and I see that each of our teams, whether big and small, we have team members from different countries and different backgrounds, and they all have their own opinions, they have their thoughts, they have their beliefs. So fostering a positive overall team environment goes a very long way in enriching an individual team member's mindset and making them happy. Dan, I read somewhere that happy people are supposed to be 25% more productive as compared to unhappy people. And when you think about it at an individual level, I mean, that kind of makes sense. So then you have to think about, how do you make people happy? Of course, you need a good work culture at an organization level, but you also need a good work culture at team level. uh, you know, deve- one more critical item is developing the culture of trust between team members. Trust will improve collaborations. It will inculcate a desire to be more productive. Sharing time out of office, out of workspace, having team building, hanging out together. That's good for that's good for team spirit. Having open communication, respecting, having a code of conduct, for example. I believe each team should have a code of conduct on how to behave and what are the expectations in terms of behavior. And in a lot of projects that I've worked with, we have there are like shared coffee breaks, planned lunches. So it's a good thing to celebrate the food, the language, differences, celebrate wins. And I think all these things together are a good way to foster team spirit. And a team that is happy will be more productive, and it will work more happily for a long time.
Okay.
So yeah, there are many things we can do in many different technical, cultural. There are definitely many things we can do, and there are many resources available to empower us to do these things now.
So just to ask kind of a hypothetical question, if you were in a funding agency and you had, let's say, some amount of money, let's say $10 million, what fraction of that would you give to people that are doing research on productivity, on trying to understand practices and culture, and what fraction would you say really should actually be given to just applying the practices we already know? Kind of what's the balance of how much research should we be doing into figuring these things out, and how much do we already know the right things and we just need to work on applying them better?
See, it's very difficult to give a number, right? But it's very difficult to quantify how much money one should allocate, because we are, as in the scientific environment, I believe we may know the theory, but we are still a little away from the actual practice of how to uh, make software sustainable, how to develop, how to improve developer productivity. We are away from that. So I wouldn't want to give a number, but I think every team should be allocated a certain fraction of money. So as to manage their time, uh, and to manage their time to improve on this. Like if you have software, if your software is not sustainable, then there's going to be a lot of technical debt in the future, and it is going to come back to bite you. So there has to be some amount of money depending on the project scale, size, allocated to projects to work on these aspects, to improve on these aspects, I think. And simply asking teams to come up with requirements or more documents, to enforce a kind of behavior might not work. But if 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 funding agencies could allocate some fraction of money explicitly, I think it would go a long way in encouraging people to think about all these topics and not treat them as second-class citizens.
Okay. Well, let me ask one final question, which is, if you were thinking about your job and your position, what kinds of things are you looking to accomplish in the next few years in this area? How would we what's the impact that you want to have on developer productivity in the next couple of years, say?
So I work on many different topics, and this is one of my favorites. And in my interaction with the broad community, I see either lack of awareness of the importance of this topic until it's too late, or I see that people don't know where to get the right information about how to improve software productivity, software sustainability, developer productivity in the scientific environment. There are resources available on these topics in the generic industry settings, but when it comes to specific research organizations in scientific environments, this kind of information is lacking. So my mission and goal is to empower people with the knowledge of how to achieve both these topics, software sustainability, developer productivity, in their daily work environment without being burdened by it. Even if there's no explicit money being given for it, how do you still make it a part of your daily work environment, of your daily projects? That is my mission and goal, because I think once everybody intuitively ingrains all this and realizes the importance, it will just become second nature, irrespective of whether they are being explicitly funded for it or not. So that's my mission, especially in the scientific environment. I can elaborate on this more, but we might run out of time.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think this is an inspiring way to actually to wrap up with a clear statement of a future that we want to get to, and how you're going to help us get there. So I think this is great. So let me so let's end at this point, and let me thank you for taking the time to do this. And hopefully everybody that's watching this as part of the Collegeville workshop will enjoy this, and will be able to contact you if they have any questions or want to hear anything more. So thank you.
Wonderful, Dan. I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay.